Welcome back to Frontier Echoes, where we bring the rugged tales of the Wild West to life, stories of daring cowboys, fearless women, and dusty towns where legends were born. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Let's get started. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the open prairie in deep oranges and purples. The wind swept across the dry grass, whispering through the canyons and across the cattle ranch that had been in the McAllister family for generations. Life out here was never easy, and if there was one thing everyone knew, it was that the land demanded respect, and sometimes, even fear. Rancher Tom McAllister had spent decades tending to his herd, repairing fences, and chasing down strays. He had a way with cattle that few could match, a combination of patience and an unspoken understanding of the animals he raised. But even the best of cowboys sometimes found themselves in trouble, and Tom was about to learn that the prairie had a way of teaching hard lessons in the most unexpected ways. It all began one afternoon when Tom rode into the dusty town of Red Creek to collect supplies and pay a few bills. His pockets were lighter than usual, and his mind heavier. The rent on his land had risen again this season, and the crops hadn't yielded nearly as much as he had hoped. The bank had been kind enough to offer a short extension, but there was no escaping the fact that Tom was on the edge of losing the land he loved more than anything in the world. As he tied his horse to the post outside the general store, a commotion drew his attention. A crowd had gathered near the saloon, and from the middle of it emerged a figure that seemed almost larger than life. A woman, tall as a tree and broad-shouldered, yet moving with the grace of a seasoned rider. She wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over her piercing eyes, a fringed jacket that swung with her every step, and boots that had seen more miles than most men dared to ride. She was the kind of person who commanded attention simply by existing, and everyone in the street gave her a wide berth as she approached. Tom recognized her immediately. Folks called her Big Jane, a cowgirl of legendary strength and skill who had traveled from ranch to ranch, offering aid and, occasionally, stern lessons to those who needed it. She had a reputation for fairness but also for being unyielding when it came to debts and promises. And now, she was looking straight at him. "So you say you can't pay your rent," Jane said, her voice deep and steady, cutting through the hum of the townsfolk. There was no accusation in her tone, only the cold clarity of fact. Tom swallowed hard, dust sticking to his lips as he tried to find the right words. "It's been a rough season, Miss Jane. The cattle fell ill, the river ran low, and the market's prices are pitiful. I'm doing everything I can, but there ain't enough to cover it all." Jane's eyes narrowed slightly, and she stepped closer. The crowd instinctively shifted back. There was a power in her presence, a mix of determination and quiet authority. "I've been around long enough to know when a man's telling the truth and when he's spinning tales," she said. "And I reckon you're telling me the truth. But truth alone don't pay the rent, do it?" Tom shook his head, the weight of worry settling over him like a heavy cloak. "No ma'am, it don't." Jane sighed and looked out over the prairie, as if weighing the land itself against the troubles of a single man. Then she did something no one expected. She smiled, just a little, but it carried warmth and resolve all at once. "All right, Tom McAllister," she said. "I'll make you a deal. 1 week. You've got 7 days to find a way to cover your rent. Or you'll have to figure out somewhere else to call home." Tom blinked in surprise. The townsfolk murmured among themselves. 7 days was a short time for a man whose livelihood depended on unpredictable land and cattle. But the glint in Jane's eye hinted at more than just a challenge. It was an opportunity, one that Tom couldn't afford to pass up. "Thank you, Miss Jane," Tom said, tipping his hat. "I won't let you down." Jane nodded once and turned on her heel, her silhouette cutting a striking figure against the setting sun. "You'd better not," she called over her shoulder. "And remember, sometimes the answer ain't what you expect it to be." Tom returned to his ranch, the enormity of the task pressing down on him. He rode along the fence lines, inspecting the cattle, the fields, and the small homestead that had been his family's pride for generations. His mind raced, calculating expenses, possibilities, and options. 7 days. It was barely enough time to turn things around, but Tom was no stranger to hard work. The first night, he sat by the fire, thinking through every idea he could muster. He considered selling part of the herd, but that would only provide a temporary reprieve and reduce his long-term income. Borrowing from a neighbor wasn't feasible, most of them were struggling themselves. Then came an idea, sparked by the tales he had heard about Big Jane's travels and the ways she had helped others in town. He decided to turn to the community. Tomorrow, he would ride into Red Creek and propose a cooperative effort. If the town could pool resources, perhaps they could help him save the ranch, and in return, he would ensure they all benefited from the land and the livestock. It was risky, but desperation often breeds boldness. The following morning, Tom saddled his horse and rode into town. Word of Jane's challenge had spread, and many townsfolk were watching, curious about whether he would succeed. Tom dismounted near the square and began talking to shopkeepers, blacksmiths, and neighbors. Some shook their heads, doubtful, but others nodded thoughtfully, intrigued by the idea of working together to save one of their own. By noon, Tom had assembled a small group willing to help. They were a mix of farmers, ranchers, and tradesmen, each bringing something to the table: grain, tools, labor, or even cattle. Tom outlined a plan where everyone could contribute a little, and in return, profits from the next season's harvest and livestock sales would be shared proportionally. It was a gamble, but it was a plan rooted in trust and the kind of frontier ingenuity that had kept settlers alive for generations. As the sun dipped once again, Jane appeared on the ridge overlooking the town. She watched silently as Tom and the townsfolk worked together, moving supplies, mending fences, and preparing pens for new livestock. Her presence was like a silent acknowledgement, a way of saying she had seen the effort and would judge the results soon enough. For the next several days, Tom and his newfound allies worked tirelessly. The ranch, which had seemed on the brink of collapse, slowly began to recover. Pens were repaired, pastures were cleared, and the sick cattle were treated and fed. By the sixth day, Tom had a better sense of hope than he had felt in months. But even as progress was made, there was always that looming question: would it be enough? On the seventh day, Jane rode into town once more. She dismounted smoothly, her boots crunching against the gravel, and walked up to Tom. "Well, McAllister," she said, her tone neutral but expectant. "Time's up, show me what you've done." Tom led her through the ranch, pointing out the repairs, the healthier cattle, and the organization of the communal effort that had taken shape. The townsfolk watched from a distance, holding their breaths as Jane moved from one area to another, inspecting everything with a keen eye. Finally, she stopped and looked at Tom directly. "I'll be honest," she said, her voice carrying that same calm authority, "I didn't think you'd pull it off. But you did more than just keep your ranch alive. You brought the town together, found solutions where there seemed to be none, and proved that grit and collaboration can beat even the harshest odds." Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. He tipped his hat again. "Thank you, Miss Jane. I couldn't have done it without everyone's help." Jane nodded, a rare smile breaking across her face. "Remember what I said about the answer not always being what you expect. Sometimes, the key ain't just work or luck. It's people, trust and effort combined. Never forget that, McAllister. It'll carry you further than any herd or fence could." And with that, she turned and rode off into the sunset, leaving Tom standing in the middle of his ranch, the wind picking up around him as if echoing her words. He looked around at the townsfolk, the healthier cattle, and the repaired land, and realized that despite the trials, he had gained something even more valuable than simply keeping the ranch. He had discovered the strength of community, the power of determination, and the unexpected ways in which a giant cowgirl could change the course of a life. From that day on, Tom McAllister never looked at hardship the same way again. He knew that no matter how difficult the season, there was always a path forward if he was willing to seek help, innovate, and persevere. And somewhere on the horizon, he imagined Big Jane riding off to her next challenge, a reminder that the Wild West was full of surprises and that courage often came in the most unexpected forms. So remember, when life seems impossible, and the rent is due or the storms come, look to the lessons of those who've faced the land before you. Sometimes it's the giants, those who are larger than life, fearless, and fair, who teach the greatest lessons. And sometimes, it's the simple act of reaching out, of asking for help and offering your own hands, that turns the tide. Tom's story spread through Red Creek, becoming a tale of inspiration and frontier wisdom. Travelers who passed through the town would hear of the rancher who saved his land with the help of his neighbors and the legendary cowgirl who challenged him to rise above his fears. And in every telling, there was a message that resonated deeply with anyone living on the edge of hardship: never underestimate the power of community, courage, and a little unexpected guidance from a giant cowgirl. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the McAllister ranch thrived once more. Tom never forgot Jane's words, keeping her lesson alive in every decision, every new calf, and every fence he repaired. And while Jane was never seen again in Red Creek, her legacy remained, not just in the story, but in the spirit she inspired, reminding all who heard it that even in the toughest times, hope, action, and community could prevail. And that, friends, is a tale from the open plains, where courage meets wisdom, and the impossible becomes possible when giants walk among us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with your friends. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and remember, the frontier isn't just a place, it's a spirit, one that lives in all of us when we face our challenges head on.